Now, it's been a busy week for the British Prime Minister Theresa May as she continues her first visit to the Irish border since the Brexit referendum. The border still remains a crucial factor with the EU, but in the UK, here's an example of the attitude towards Ireland and our stance in the Brexit negotiations. The front page of the UK edition of The Sun is calling our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar an airhead. Joining me with that story and others making the news this morning, Newstalk's Kieran Cuddihy and Ellen Gunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Now, look, we are talking about The Sun, we are talking about tabloid journalism and a particular point of view put in a particular kind of way. And a lot of people will say, oh, look, don't pay attention to that, it's just hype, nonsense, it's just hot air and guff. But the problem is that this is a hugely important and influential publication in the UK and was instrumental in carrying the Leave the Brexit vote. So we can be really offended and say, oh, they would say that, wouldn't they? Or we can poo-poo it because, sure, it's only a tabloid. But this is going to the heartland of a huge amount of people who all the pollsters didn't think would vote for Brexit.
I think this reflects a real feeling in Britain. I mean, you read the piece and you think, we were joking earlier, you know, please get off the fence, because it really does. It calls the Taoiseach an airhead. It says that he's a puppet of the EU.
A big mouth and a fool and boneheaded and craven to the EU, among other things.
Serves no good purpose, you know, name calling, not into it at all. But I get where they're coming from, that they really don't see the importance of an Irish border or the Irish border as an issue. They don't understand why it's such a big issue, either for Ireland or for the EU. And that's really at the nub of it all. Theresa May is over at the moment and she's talking, this is 2 years after the Brexit vote, she's talking to businesses and individuals and asking them about the impact of Brexit on Northern Ireland, and assumably she's supposed to be listening to them and reflecting their thoughts. She has already decided what will happen with Brexit. And I think Boris Johnson, quite a while back, was very derogatory about the border as well. And he said it's a little border and what's the big deal and it's taking so much time. I think it really reflects what Britain feels, that there is a border somewhere over there in Ireland that is actually consuming all of the talk about Brexit, and they don't get it. They don't get how important it is, I think. From her point of view, she's over and she's listening to people like the Confederation of British Industry saying they think that the North is heading into recession. All of the other parties, Sinn Féin, the SDLP, the Greens, and who am I missing, the Alliance, all joined together and said, we are 49 of the 90 MEPs who represent a Northern Ireland that voted to stay in the EU. And yet there is no Stormont, there is no way that Theresa May can hear the voices of people in Northern Ireland. And I think that's a big issue, and that reflects on the media in the UK.
Kieran, we could get bogged down in this name calling and, oh, how dare they, etc., etc. But there's two other very serious aspects of this which have happened. Dominic Raab, the new Brexit Secretary, went to Brussels yesterday and got blown out of the water, literally. They just went, this is not going to happen. The Chequers paper was unlikely to fly in the first place, since it's been watered down now. Absolutely no chance. The UK's response is deeply unhelpful. The really important thing that we should maybe pay attention to is the IMF have come in and diagnosed what's going to happen. Now, we've no love for them here, right? They told us an awful lot of hard truths. We didn't listen to all of them, but we had to take some of that medicine on board. The loss to the EU in general be about 250 billion. That's €250 billion. 1 million jobs across the 27 economies, 1.5 decrease in output all the way across. This is going to cost everybody an awful lot of money, and it's going to cost us more than most.
Yeah, and in the first point, Dominic Raab got blown out of the water. It's the right way to describe it. I was kind of a bit bemused at how people over the last few days with all these votes in the Commons were aghast that kind of the Chequers agreement had been torn up. You know, this agreement, all these rollbacks had occurred because of votes in the Commons. I mean, the Chequers agreement was never going to fly. No. We knew that. We talked about that actually here last week, that it was always going to be rejected. So the Chequers agreement in that sense didn't matter. It was just a starting point. On the second point, on the IMF warning, to a degree they're telling us what we knew, that Britain is a net contributor to the EU budget.
They're spelling it out now in stark terms.
Yeah, and internally within the UK, they've had these economic warnings, and the Brexiteers, some of whom we've mentioned, have been at pains to point out that they disagree with them. It's going to be very hard, though, to disagree with the level of noise coming from the side who argue this is going to be economically detrimental. And when we talk about it from an Irish point of view, Northern Ireland particularly is going to be badly hit. As Ellen said, it looks like they're sliding towards recession. They're a part of the UK economy that relies most heavily on central exchequer funding to keep them going. The amount of money that comes from Westminster to keep everything, keep the lights on in Northern Ireland has been a feature of the North since year one.
It's a major loss leader to the UK exchequer.
Exactly, and if the UK exchequer takes a big hit, which it will according to their own economic forecast and according to this new IMF forecast, then it's Northern Ireland who are going to suffer most from that. And Northern Ireland farmers as well, who are going to suffer a huge amount because of cap payments.
It's taken her 2 years to get to the North, which is very little and way, way too late. But what's she likely to say today?
She's likely to have your cake and eat it, which we keep coming back to. She's probably going to keep up with that theme of having her cake and eating it. She'll talk about why the UK is an intrinsic part, Northern Ireland is an intrinsic part of the United Kingdom.
We'll never abandon
That will never change. We will never abandon you. Yes, there will never be a hard border on the island of Ireland. Yet we will not abandon the will of the people. So, you know, all of those are... They're not all mutually exclusive, but some of them are with one another. It's impossible to keep all three promises, but that's not going to stop her making them. She will make all three promises today.
Okay, well, it's getting worse than a bad soap opera, but it is, as Alec Ferguson used to say, squeaky bum time, very squeaky bum time, and likely to get squeakier. Let's move to back home. Paschal Donoghue, the Minister for Public Expenditure, or the Minister for the Public Purse, I suppose, really, to call him. There's a series of expenditure reviews done, and health is getting the headlines in the front page of the Times, but there's other areas as well. The one thing about health is we know no matter how much money we're putting into it, and we've increased it by about 700 million over the last 4 years, Alan, the services have failed to improve. We see indications of where some of that money is going. You know, 1 million overpaid by TUSA to its staff. HSE youth programmes, expense accounts with absolutely no guidelines. God knows how much money went down the drain or where it even went. Policing, justice, legal aid and Garda overtime are going to have to be looked at. Education, hundreds of primary school teachers will be surplus to requirement in a couple of years' time. And our public service pensions bill is going to go up by, is it 2 billion by 2025?
It's incredible. It's actually, they're a very hard set of figures to get control on. If you look at the health area, the health is still employing 350 to 400 new people per month. This is a funnel that we keep throwing money into and we cannot see the results of it. The logic says that if we keep putting more money into healthcare, we should have a better healthcare. We don't. It actually needs a root and branch reform. Now, Sláinte Care was supposed to be the agreed approach that everybody said this is what we need to do. But what I don't understand is less money is going into Sláinte Care and the government is saying we need to keep putting money into this black hole that isn't solving anything. There needs to be one system that everybody agrees this is how the healthcare will proceed and only put money into it that way.
Kieran, if Sláinte Care was supposed to be the silver bullet, and the Minister's now been told, well, actually, we've wasted so much money, or we've overrun by so far, we actually don't have the money for Sláinte Care. What does that say?
Yeah, it leaves them in this awkward position. Sláinte Care, I think, was about 2 billion extra investment is what it was going to be. It always jarred this argument that 2 billion was going to make a difference, because I think we're fifth in terms of OECD per capita spending on healthcare. Germany is just above us. You know, would leapfrogging ahead of Germany suddenly provide us with this wonderful healthcare system? I don't think anyone believes that, which is all that extra 2 billion in funding would likely provide. When you actually look at hospital budget breakdowns, which is what they go into in some of that, despite all that extra spending as well, hospital spending per patient is down because of, I suppose, our ageing population. If you look at somewhere like Beaumont and particularly the ageing population they have in that part of North Dublin, the amount of patients they're seeing is skyrocketing at a much higher pace than the level of extra spending going in healthcare. So that spending is not necessarily, even though it's increasing, it's not necessarily going where it's needed, and that's part of the problem.
It's basically, it's going down the drain.
Yeah.